I went over, people would say, were you afraid of being killed? When I went over, discussing this on the ship with other people, I was convinced that I wasn't coming back.
We were grateful for President Truman to have the guts to use the bomb and end it.
Now, you knew each other before you went to school together?
He was a year ahead of me in school.
Okay.
So he graduated along the way from grammar school, both in Winooski, and then he went to Cathedral and I went to Winooski High. But careers were somewhat similar along the way. In our latter years of high school, we worked in the mill. I was happy to write a letter later on, which is in part of the Mill Museum, by the way. My letter is posted there telling them that I thanked them for the service that they gave me before the war.
My work was to supply the people who worked there with empty spools so they could fill them up with their machines, and I would help them. And I would help them in this sense. In those days, there were 15 women that I worked with, one man, the boss, and myself. 2 males, and there was a men's room in that floor. No ladies' room for 15 women. They had to go upstairs. So I told these women, I said, I know how to work your machines. So if you have to go to the ladies' room, let me know, and I'll work your machine for you, because they were on piecework. The more they produced, the more they got paid. I tell people, I made 15 friends that summer.
When I left there, just prior to going into basic training, I knew that I was never going to return there in that sweatshop.
Downtown Winooski, for example, was very active. Not only the bars, but I mean the people hung around downtown a lot. But World War II, decimated the area.
At age 18, as a senior in high school, I decided that I wanted to become an aviation cadet.
Everybody in those days wanted to join the service. Probably later on it wasn't quite, maybe just the opposite, but in those days everybody wanted to join.
I had to volunteer through the draft for the Army Aviation in the summer of 1943 to go to Fort Devens overnight, board a train for 3 days down to Miami Beach for basic training.
I signed up in the reserves in December of 1942. I was actually called in June of 43. And I served in 10 or 12 different Army posts in the United States. And then I wound up, after graduating from OCS, which was Officer Candidate School. And one of my good experiences as an officer in the infantry was teaching Japanese Americans. When you tell them to hit the dirt, most of the Americans would go down gently, kneel, and then put their rifle butt out there to protect their fall. Not the Japanese. They would throw themselves down, and I checked with them at night in their barracks. They were bloody, but they never complained. They gave all out to be good soldiers. My orders read overseas shipment, and through Fort Meade, and we went overseas. I served with the 87th Infantry Division. Infantry platoon leaders, which I was, they're very poor risk. Well, I could give you a lot of different little vignettes of what happened in my career, but the liberation of Buchenwald was one of the highlights. Today, probably some people don't believe it ever happened, but I'll never forget that, never. It was horrible, horrible. The last part of April of 1945. I never forgot that. I remember one particular inmate there, they took the sheet off from his body and he was naked from the waist on up, and you could count all of his ribs and his cheeks were hollowed, and he looked awful. He was young, 19 years old, and he was like a political prisoner. His father had been in politics in Austria, and I don't think he was a Jew, but in any event, he was an intern there at Buchenwald. I wanted to feed him, but we were told, don't feed them because you'll kill them, because they've been on starvation diet, for a while. And I understand he died a couple of days after I was talking to him. These are the ovens that they would put the steel stretcher in, burn the bodies, and then the ashes would go in these urns. And I saw in jars human body parts in formaldehyde or something. And they also made lampshades out of human skin. We saw that. And we talked to some of the inmates, and some of the inmates had seen how these lampshades are made. To see those people who had done nothing wrong, mostly because they were Jewish, but not always. Sometimes they're just pure political prisoners. And it's amazing that what they went through, and some of them survived. And many of them, of course, died. When the war ended in Europe, I was actually in Europe. And in fact, in my album, I have a picture of the building that the surrender document was signed with Eisenhower and some German official in Reims. The Americans pronounce it Reims, France.
I ended up going to Sioux City, Iowa for a while, and at that time it was August of '45. As you know, the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the middle of August.
My division was slated to go to Japan for the invasion of Japan. So thank God for Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
We were grateful for President Truman to have the guts to use the bomb and end it.
You hear a lot of people who say that we should not have used the bomb. I'm just the opposite. I'm grateful that it was used. Truman made, in my opinion, made a wise decision, because we would have lost a lot of Americans.
We received word through the Swedish embassy that they wanted to surrender. The Japanese did. On the 2nd of September, aboard the Missouri in Tokyo Bay, when the war was signed over. Yeah, there was happy days, very much so.
Newsmen rushed the president's report to a waiting world. And through the early evening, Tuesday, August 14th, the fateful news is flashed. In New York City, as throughout a rejoicing nation and world, vast throngs of grateful, happy people celebrate the end of fighting, the dawn of peace. 2 million New Yorkers jammed Times Square. It's official. It's all over. It's total victory.
So I was home on leave when the war ended in Japan, and I rejoiced that I didn't have to go, and I think my life was spared because I didn't go, because it would have been a slaughter there, but if it hadn't been for those atomic bombs.
We lost a lot of Americans in those years. You know, that span from 39 to 45, that 6-year span, not at any one time, but there were 15 million of us in the service. And fortunately, the majority of them came home.
After we came back from overseas, I taught school in Camp Butler, North Carolina, and finally I wound up at Fort McClellan, Alabama, and came home in May, I guess it was, of 1946. So I served a total of almost 3 years.
The war ended. We were all reassigned to other places. I was sent to Santa Ana, California, and worked in a payroll office, making out payrolls for those men who were part of the Bataan Death March. So they'd been prisoners of war and most of the time hospitalized. They were in very poor shape, but we made out payrolls for them and so on. The best part of the 30-month service that took place was we'd take a streetcar every night and go to Hollywood. We'd go to Stage Door Canteen, get a free meal, get tickets to the NBC, CBS studios, which was not television, by the way, that was radio back then. And then between the two on Sunset Boulevard was the Palladium, which was a big dance hall, the greatest era of American music, by the way. We enjoyed that for free. It was a great 3 months, and then I was discharged honorably and came home.
How long have you been volunteering here at the...
Well, I've been here a long time, but I've been here about 6 years, I think. I was approached by a friend of mine who was in my unit when I was a shop superintendent of the maintenance shop. And he kept after me to join him here on Thursdays. Having soldiered together, we knew each other quite well. But my wife and I spent 20 years in Florida every winter, 6-month winters there and 6 months here. We owned a home down there. And when Barb passed away, then he approached me again, and he knew he had me. And I'm grateful that he came back looking for me. So it's been great. I knew Bob all my life, but we really got acquainted since we were working together here on Thursdays. Mm-hmm. And we've grown fond of each other. We got a lot in common.
Yep.
Any parting comments that you want to add? Or any
Thank you for
vignettes or any other...
thank you for allowing us to share our
Very
experiences.
grateful, thank you.
Yeah, we don't talk about it very often, but brings back a lot of memories. Some very good, and some not quite as good.